but he was saying that I think on, I don't know if it's Spotify or iTunes, that they actually have an apostolic worship section now. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's correct. And at first we started noticing because, like, if you looked up my church, a recommended listen would be like Sharon McKee or a Texas Bible College or a David Jennings or a Mark Crowder. And we never told them we were together.
Mm.
They figured it out based on our audience. So now there's like, that's a thing. Apostolic music is a thing now.
Welcome, everyone. Today we are blessed to be joined by Kurt Kanhai. He is the music director of First Pentecostal Church in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and has helped produce a number of notable apostolic recordings. Along with that, he is the co-host of the podcast, The Convo with Kurt and Colton. We had a great conversation where he shared with us his story and how he got involved with ministry. We talked about his love for music and what it's like being involved with the birth of the apostolic worship genre. He shared his advice for creatives, and we discussed the Beyond 2024 initiative that is bringing him to Sydney. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's good to have you on. We've been, I guess, communicating back and forth a little bit in the lead up to what we're going to talk about a little bit later in this conversation, you guys coming out to Australia. But it's great to finally get to chat with you and spend this time together. And of course, doing it on this platform with the audience being able to hear from you and being able to connect with you as well. Thank you so much for providing your time and joining us today.
No, I'm the one that's honored to be here. I follow your stuff closely, and it's awesome what you're doing and the reach that you have. It's just really what's needed in the kingdom these days. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Well, we're big fans of you guys as well with your podcast, Kurt and Colton. Always enjoy. I'm not much of a muso, but I still enjoy listening to you guys talk about it. I'm sure people who are musicians are getting a whole lot more out of it, but I just enjoy your guys' banter and Colton, he cracks me up.
Colton's hilarious. He was just here a few minutes ago. He just stepped out. He's definitely the funny one.
Well, I like to start out all these conversations by our audience getting to know the guest a little bit. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your story, your background, as we get into the conversation. Thanks, Kurt.
Okay, well, my name's Kurt Kanhai. I was born and raised in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, actually. So I'm also a member of the Commonwealth, as you are. Then I moved to Atlanta with my family when I was like 18, 19. Spent like my formative years there, if you would. That's where I really got serious about music and got serious about ministry, if you will. And then now I live in North Little Rock. I live in Sherwood, Arkansas, but most people know about Little Rock, Arkansas. And I attend the First Pentecostal Church. I'm the music director here. And, it's been a awesome ride. I have a wife and two wonderful children. And I'm just enjoying everything that's happening these days.
We were just chatting before we started recording about how we have a connection going back years. I met your brother-in-law, Lawami.
Yes.
Man, I think I was maybe 20 years old. I'd first started working at the church. He was one of our first guest preachers when I moved to Sydney.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool finding out that connection as well.
Yeah, I spent a lot of years being Lawami Diaz's brother-in-law, and now, of course, he is Kurt Kanhai's brother-in-law. So we're enjoying how the tables have turned.
Yeah, I have a similar story with my mother-in-law, Gina Gretsch. For years and years and years, it's like, this is Greg, Gina Gretsch's son-in-law. And then with the advent of the podcast, more people are starting to know my name a bit more. So that's actually kind of funny. It happened to her a couple of times. She's preaching over in the States at ladies' conferences, and they're asking her, do you know Greg Hagethorn? They just know Australia. It's like, yeah, that's my son-in-law.
That's funny.
Yeah, well, so you talked a little bit about how you got serious about music when you were in Atlanta, which has an amazing music scene. And when did, beyond your musical skill and that sort of thing, when did you first feel the call into ministry?
So, I was thinking about it, and I don't ever remember if I felt like I realized that I was called to ministry. I think it was, and it just sounds weird just saying, I hope this doesn't offend anybody the way I'm saying it, but I've always, how I was raised, my dad was very involved. My family was very involved in the church. My dad was one of those go-getters that, like, if church started at 10, we were going to be there at 8 to open the doors. It was Canada, so we had to shovel the driveway, possibly turn the heat on, stuff like that. So I've always been acquainted with being at church way before everybody else. And, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was being trained for ministry. And then, I was a musician, so I've always played, since I was a teenager. And at some level or another, and it wasn't until like I was in my 20s, that I realized, well, I guess this is what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to,
Mm.
serve God and working for his kingdom, at the church. Like I think I realized that, and I started positioning myself to get better musically, and also become a better leader,
Mm.
and also like do things that I could help the church be better and help us better deliver the message that we're trying to
Mm.
deliver.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, often that happens. You sort of catch the call where it's like, maybe especially if you grow up in church and you've got parents who have you around the house of God. It's
Right.
like, and you're in a family that's like, hey, whatever you can do to help the church, whatever you can do to help what's happening on a Sunday, do it.
Right.
Sounds like that was the sort of environment that you grew up in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was no other option. If church was
Yeah.
going on, we were there, and we were going to be there till it was over. And then probably we were going to be there till everybody else was gone. And then we could go home.
Yeah.
And when you grow up like that, it's not really it's not a negative,
No.
it might sound like a negative thing to someone that doesn't understand that, but when that's the only way, it's just the way, so.
Yeah, yeah, it's like part of your life. I guess it'd be almost similar to like a child of a small business owner. Like they don't know
Right.
anything different than being
Right.
involved with the business. But what advice would you give someone who feels a call to ministry? And of course, here on the podcast, when we're talking about ministry, we're not just talking about pulpit. We're not just talking about platform, but ministry in general. And that could be playing an instrument, singing, worship leading, just being a part of ministry. What would some advice that you would give them?
Some advice I would give is find somebody that's doing what you want to do, or what you could see yourself doing, and that's doing it well, and like study them and even serve them if you can, like be around. That's how a lot of my first opportunities came about. It wasn't, my first sessions were not because somebody called me and thought I would be a good fit. My first sessions were that I was at every rehearsal for a session, not playing. I was just there watching how they set up, watching how they
Mm.
rehearsed, watching how, and then sometimes when you're in the right position, opportunities come about. And success, they say, is just when preparedness meets opportunity. And, that's why I've been able to have a lot of opportunities, because I was just in the right place and I was ready when those opportunities. So I would say to that person that, if you're feeling a call on your life, or if you're just finding yourself like I was, being called over and over and again, you need to really just think about the things that you can do to make yourself and the people around you better, and that everyone can have a better experience.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And one thing I like to talk to people about is like look for a space where you can serve now. Like
Right.
there might be an area where you feel God's calling you towards, but there might be an area of need that's pertinent right now,
Right.
and you'll grow in that, right? Like a lot of things that I did the last 14, 15 years in the lead up to starting the church plant last year was not necessarily what I felt called at 16, 18 years old by God to do, but that helped in the development process, and it also helped the church, right? Which is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
It's not just about us. We're there to help the kingdom.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love the practicality of that answer. And you mentioned that you're the music director at First Pentecostal Church North of Little Rock, which is a amazing church. It's a happening church. You guys have incredible music, and now the last few years, your live stream. If you guys aren't following this church, you need to follow the live stream. It's really cool. The services that and the preachers and the pastor, the ministry that's going forth is great. But your talent has been a blessing to the broader church, not just your local church. You've worked with a number of apostolic artists and putting albums together. You're also mentioned it at the top that you're a co-host of the Convo with Kurt and Colton. So you're a very busy guy. You're involved with a lot of creatives, right?
Yep.
And like creatives that are like at a very high standard. Can you talk about the importance of creatives in the local church?
Yeah, so it's funny because we talk about creatives now. I think it's something that's become more accepted these last few days, that there's a place for creatives in the church, right? Um, it's not just maybe like, at times there was like a pastor, preacher, there was a musician, but things are developing now where there's a need for other positions in the church, like as we're calling them now, creatives, and you could be creative in so many areas: video, photography, um, video editing, music, just so many. There's so many areas because there's so many ways that we could spread the gospel now with the, social media is so large, and there's so many ways to reach people and to get our message out there, and creatives are an integral part of that in this day. Somebody brought to my attention earlier about the scripture in Exodus 35, and it talks about Exodus 35. God gave the design for his tabernacle, and then he turned it over to the creatives to make it happen. And I was reading about that, in preparation for this podcast, and Exodus 35 and 31 said that he had filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, in understanding, and in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship. And I was just thinking about that, and it was like, he filled him with the Spirit of God, which we all talk about that. That's the first step. But then in wisdom, in understanding, in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship. And it was like he had a talent, but the Holy Ghost like enhanced that talent. So like that reminds me of a creative. Like, so you may be creative in the area of taking videos, but when you like put your Holy Ghost with that, he can enhance that, and he can use that then to like do something to build the kingdom. And also, this caught my attention in verse 34. And he said that God put it in his heart that he could teach others. And I think that's a very important part of being a creative. And it's recreating yourself in others, mentoring others, and recreating yourself, leaving that legacy of this is the way I do stuff, take it, make it better, and keep doing it. I think that's a very important part of a creative that often we don't talk about, but it's recreating yourself in others. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think that second part, the first part's very good, but the second part is good as well, because sometimes as a creative, you're kind of relying on your talent a bit, and you feel like, oh, maybe I can't recreate this with somebody else, or if I share this, then I might not be unique in what I'm putting forth. But yeah, it's so important to not just have the skill, but to teach it as well. And getting back to the first part of what you said, where you have the Spirit of God enhance what you're doing. It's so important that whatever we're doing, whatever we find ourselves doing, whether it is creative ministry, whether it's working on a 9-to-5 job, that we allow the presence of God to be with us in those moments. That it's not just we're relying on our own ability, we're relying on our own skill. And someone like yourself, coming from you, who can probably rely on their own ability at times or be tempted to, it's so important that we check that and like, no, it's not about me. I need to allow the Spirit of God to have his work in me and through me.
Right, absolutely. Really being at the church, at this particular church, is some of the greatest lessons that I've learned is how to allow my consecration in my life as a Christian to make my creativity even more powerful, make it stronger. Because, when you do those things like daily, we talk about daily prayer at the church, and, we're doing all those things. You don't really realize it until you look back and you be like, how effective it's been in helping my music ministry. I remember when I was a kid, there was a guy that someone asked, "How do you get better on bass?" And he said you have to use your knees. And that, to a young musician, that doesn't, that's not what they're looking for. Probably the answer they're looking for what scales do I practice. But this person, he was with conviction, said the best way to get better on your instrument is to use your knees. And here I am, all these years later, and I can attest that that's 100% true.
So along with that, like I mentioned, that you have a lot of influence when it comes to live recordings with apostolic artists and helping write, and you're doing something which we'll talk about in a minute. But before we talk about beyond, would you mind sharing a little bit? I know we've got a number of musicians and worship leaders and songwriters who listen to the podcast. Would you mind talking a little bit about your writing process? You don't have to go into great detail. This may not be the best platform for that, but you can at least share a little bit about what you do and your approach.
So my writing, I'm a big student of music. I've been a student of music for my whole life. Probably my parents, you know, it's weird because they're musical. They're not really that musical, but they had like an amazing record collection when I was a kid. Like they had Hawkins records, they had Andre Crouch records, and I remember listening to that music, and it's not what we used to sing at my church, though, weirdly. So I remember hearing like the music we sang at my church, and then
In
hearing
Canada?
these music, yeah, and realize, and then like I grew up in like a Caribbean church, like so it was all like Jamaican people, so it was like it was not Andre Crouch, it was not the Hawkins, but I remember thinking to myself, wow, this music is like way better, and like I've always had that love and study for music and songwriting. And so that's pretty much my process. Like I always think about a song and how it's going to come across to a congregation. I'm not like a radio producer. That's not my thing. I'm not like a concert producer. That's not my thing. I'm like all about how is this song going to translate in a worship arena. And I think that's been part of I guess the success of what we've been doing, because no matter how different a Pentecostal church might be, we might differ in these one or two things. At the end of the day, our worship is very similar. So if we have a song that works at our church, I promise you it's going to work at your church. And if you have a song that works at your church, we're going to do it at our church. So I think that's been what's been cool about these last days, is last few years even, is that we have songs that are tailored for our congregations and our churches. And I use this example, like you would think it was so weird if you got to church on Sunday and you heard your pastor preaching like a Jensen Franklin or a TD Jakes message for verbatim. You would like be like, what? But we do that all the time. Like we sing these other people's songs and no one thinks it's weird. But maybe it is weird. Maybe we should be singing our songs. And that's what I'm all about in these days. Like, what's our song? Let's get a song for our house, a song for our day, a song for our belief system.
Yeah, and that leads me nicely into the next question I wanted to ask you. Why do you think it is so important? You touched on it a little bit there, but maybe give you a chance to unpack that a little bit more. Why do you think it is so important that Apostolics are writing songs and producing songs? You're very much involved with it all over the country and now coming up over the world. Why do you think that's so important?
I mean, I believe that we just have a unique experience, and we call it the truth, right? That's what we say. We say that we're preaching the truth. It's time for us to sing about the truth. It's time for us to, we have the talent now. There's so many skilled apostolic musicians, so many skilled singers, producers. We can release music that is birthed out of our experience on an industry standard level, if you could call it that. And that's happening now. And so we don't have to have apostolic music that sounds less than what's on the radio or less than what's being sang on these tours. We can do music that we have birthed out and it's on that level. And then we can sing it in our conferences, and we can, we can do our music. We have that ability now. We have the technology. We have the platform to do it. So I think let's do it.
Yeah, it's really cool. I forget who I had on recently, or maybe it was James Wilson that was commenting on another podcast, but he was saying that I think on, I don't know if it's Spotify or iTunes, that they actually have an apostolic worship section now, Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's correct. And at first we started noticing because, like, if you looked up my church, a recommended listen would be like Sharon McKee or a Texas Bible College or a David Jennings or a Mark Crowder. And we never told them we were together.
Mm.
They figured it out based on our audience. So now there's like, that's a thing. Apostolic music is a thing now.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is so cool. Because and the reason that's so cool is like I just remember, and you would have had similar experience growing up. We didn't have any of this. You had the Bible schools putting out albums, and there may have been a church here or there that was doing something, but there wasn't so like my kids. I've mentioned this to a few artists who have been on the pod, and my kids have grown up with apostolic artists as their favorite singers. Like my daughter. She's gone through. She's like, I've met all of them. The only one I have left to meet is James Wilson, because she's got like a top 5 or whatever that she listens to all the time, and that's so cool, man. Like my top 5 was Kirk Franklin and all these other guys, Marvin Sapp. So we didn't have that within the church.
Yeah,
But that's really
awesome.
cool. You guys,
It really is. My kids know like every David Jennings song. They know every Mark Crowder song. They know every James Wilson song. They know drilling songs. Like, it's just wild that like we have music that our kids can listen to now.
Yeah, it's awesome. And you're a big part of it. And in a couple months, you're going to be traveling down under with Tyler Sullivan for Beyond 24. We're really excited about that. It's going to be an amazing event, a historic event for us here in Australia and Sydney. And at that event, you're going to be teaching a couple sessions.
Yes.
I think during the Friday morning, Saturday morning, you're going to be teaching sessions. And then you are going to, along with the team, but you'll be producing the live recording that Tyler Sullivan has put together with a great team of singers and musicians. Now, before we get into that, besides ministry and the recording, this is your first time to Australia, correct?
First time, yes.
All right. So what are you most looking forward to doing when you come to Sydney? Because you are coming to the best city. So.
Yes. So weirdly, hopefully this doesn't sound weird, I'm really interested in seeing if the toilet flushes the other. That's really the thing I'm most interested in.
I think you're going to be a bit disappointed.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it doesn't, but the thing is in the States, so you know how the water level in the toilet is like quite high?
Yeah.
This is completely random that we're diving into this. But in Australia, because they're constantly conserving water because of the nature of our environment here, the water level is super low. So I've never noticed. So you may or may not notice. It depends. But all the Aussies, when they go to the States, are like, why are all their toilets flooded? It's like, oh no, that's the level that they have.
Yeah. That's funny. Well, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to see how the moon looks, if it really looks different, or will I even notice? I want to see a kangaroo.
Yeah, that's gonna happen for sure.
Okay, I want to see that really buff kangaroo that tries to fight people. I want to see that one for sure. And my wife's coming with me, and she's terrified of anything like spiders, snakes, or anything like that. So I really hope we run into something like that, so I could watch anxiety take over.
Yeah, normally pretty good in the city. You don't really see it, but I did once see a pretty big, quality-looking snake. It was near the ocean. So that was interesting, but you'll get spiders everywhere. I mean, they're
awesome.
So we'll make sure to point them out if we see it.
Appreciate it.
Well, we're so looking forward to having you guys. Now, do you prefer? Because I know you've done both. Do you prefer to work on live recordings or studio recordings?
I don't know that I have a preference. I think they both have their times for it. I love doing both. I love just creating and. I like taking every project and watching it come alive. So whether that's a live recording or a studio recording, I just like seeing that idea come to fruition. So I think I just love recording. I just do love recording.
So as someone who's from the outside looking in, I would imagine that a live recording is harder to do. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a lot because you only get one chance release, right? So once it's probably more pressure.
Yeah.
A lot of these days, I'll tell you a little secret. A lot of these producers are doing live recordings, but they're really just studio recordings.
A lot of overdubs.
A lot of overdubs. So I'm not that kind of producer. Like, just put those mistakes in there and we'll just show that we're human and no one's going to know. And as long as it sounds good.
Yeah. And I guess it helps that you're working with a team that is like performing live all the time. You know,
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
they're not performing, but every Sunday they're doing worship sets and that,
Yeah.
so they're used to being in an environment like that.
Exactly.
So, who are some of the other artists? I had Tyler Solon on at the beginning of the year, a couple of months ago now, not the beginning of the year, but a couple of months ago after he announced it, and he highlighted some. What are some of the artists that are going to feature on this recording?
So David Jennings will be there. He's a very popular person. Brittany Scott's going to be there. Jessica Di Giovanni is going to be there. Pauline.
Jessica is probably my wife's favorite. She's been a
Really?
huge fan since IBC days. Yeah.
Yes, Jessica.
Like a massive fan.
Jessica has a huge following in teenage girls, and just ladies of all, at my church they love Jessica. So she's very popular. I don't even think she realizes how popular she is. She'll be there. Who else? Patrick Orianis will be there. Of course, Matt Ewing will be there. Travis Dykes. Colton Duty will be there. There's quite a few heavy hitters on this team.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I think, for my wife, when it comes to Jessica, it's because I hope she isn't embarrassed by me sharing this, but because she, as a teenager, was listening to, it was an effort to get an IBC CD down here. You couldn't just get it, and so they would just be waiting for it when it come out, and she was one of the main soloists back then. So yeah.
So funny story. I went to Music Fest in I don't know. This may not be the right year. Maybe 2005, 6, somewhere in there. And I heard Jessica sing for the first time. And at that time, we were working on a recording for Atlanta West. And I had written a song that needed a female lead, and we hadn't picked the lead yet. And I went to Music Fest. I was in March, and we were going to be recording that summer. And I was like, that's the girl that needs to lead the song. And I never had met her before that. And we got in touch with Vito, her husband. And, we made it happen, and she recorded on that Atlanta West project, the song that I wrote.
That's awesome. Well, really looking forward to having the team down here. Is there anything else that you would like to share about Beyond? And
we've been meeting about it frequently, and the classes I think are going to be really, all these people that are coming on this trip teach on a regular basis, instruct at different conferences throughout the U.S. regularly. And they're all, work in their home churches. And we've been thinking about it, and we're going to Australia. We don't know for certain if the songs that you guys sing are exactly like ours or the way that you learn. But we know for sure that the principles and stuff that we have learned over these years, if you apply those principles or anyone applies those principles to what they're doing, it will yield improvement. So that's what we're excited more so about. It's teaching the things that we've learned and the way that we do stuff, to others, to new people. We've been told that people may be coming from other places other than Australia. And we're just excited about sharing the way, the successes that we've had, in really dialing down our methods and then just passing that on to somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the Australian churches would do music very similar to how they do in the States. There's a number of churches here that are using tracks and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And we sing a lot of the apostolic music as well. But yeah, I mean, there's people coming in from New Zealand, from Fiji, Singapore, I believe. Wow. Philippines as well. So it's going to be a broad spectrum of music teams and contexts, which is really cool. I mean, it's going to be a pretty unique environment, I would say.
I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. So if you want to attend the sessions, I'm just going to mention this here. If you want to attend the sessions, you do need to book a ticket. It is free to attend the morning sessions for the teaching. You go to equipandengage.org. I'll put the link in the show notes of this episode. And also there are tickets that are available for the live recording. You're doing the same recording twice, right? The same songs twice.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So the Friday night and the Saturday night, you guys will be recording that, and those tickets are available as well on equipandengage.org. And there's I think it's $50 for general admission and $60 if you want to get in early and pick your own seat, get to the front and make sure that you get the experience that you really want. That's awesome. Well, I do like to ask this question to anyone who comes on the podcast. What is it that drives you, Kurt, when it comes to ministry? What is it that is that driving force for you?
I think for me, it's getting an opportunity to improve myself over and over, because a lot of times, we're going to have Sunday service again, but you can do it better. I always like improving myself, my playing, my leadership, how I interact with others. I'm constantly trying to improve. But I think the thing that drives me the most is when you think about it, being a musician or a creative of any kind really gives you the opportunity to be a part in a service that at its core, one service can be something that changes somebody's life. Like literally, it could change the trajectory of somebody's life. Somebody that maybe never heard about even salvation before, or somebody that returns to God. You just never know, that one song that you sing could be the thing that they need to turn their life around. And, that's just amazing to think that, what we do, we can partake. Obviously, it's the word that at the end of the day, like, is the ultimate goal to where we're trying to get, but I'm playing a small role in getting us to that place, softening that person's heart or preparing them to hear that. And I mean, I think that's just an exciting thing to just be a part of that. Like, you could literally change someone's life with your ministry. And I mean, I don't think there's any greater honor than to be, used by God in that way.
Yeah, and I think even to pull it out a bit more, I mean, you could change an entire city
Yeah.
depending on the individual who is having that interaction and where God
Yeah.
calls them and where their journey leads. I mean, you just never know. Like
Yeah.
the ripple effects are just amazing. If you're committed to God and you're sold out in what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And, it's awesome. The potential every Sunday, and especially in an environment that you guys have created in North Little Rock. I mean, the impact is just phenomenal. This has been a great conversation. Thank you again for coming on and having a chat with us here. It's been great getting to know you a bit, and we're really looking forward to having you in a couple months, you and the team down here in Sydney. I do like to give all of my guests an opportunity to finish the podcast, to share a parting word with the listeners. So I've sort of guided the conversation, but this is where you can share whatever you like, whatever God's laid on your heart for this podcast. Thanks again for your time, Kurt. Really appreciate it.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for having me onto your podcast. I have a podcast as well, obviously, so I know that sometimes it's hard to wrangle people to get them on, and then I don't understand the pressure of preparing for it and hoping that it's good. So I hope this was good. I hope I wasn't boring. But I just want to say to all the listeners, just want to encourage you and everybody that's listening to get to know yourself and get to know yourself in God. And I think the most valuable you can be to the kingdom is when you're operating in the potential and realizing the potential that God has for you, and you're operating to your full potential, and just really utilizing the gifts and the talent, because we all have gifts and talents, and utilizing the gift and talent that God has given you in order to fulfill his purpose, not only in your life, but in the lives of those around you and in your city and in your country and all around the world. Really, the sky's the limit when you have really yielded yourself and gotten yourself to the place that you need to be. You just never know what God can use you to do.